Welcome back, everybody. My name is Miguel Valenzuela, and we're here at Creative Thinkers. I want to thank you guys for joining us. As always, we bring you a special guest. Today, we have David Siqueiros. He is an artist that works in photography and video. He is also a world traveler, so let's meet him. Hey, David, how are you?
Hey, I'm good, Miguel. Thanks for having me on.
No, it is our pleasure, actually, because you have done a lot of amazing things, and that's what we want to talk to you about. So currently, you're in El Paso, but as I stated earlier, you actually have been a world traveler. So how did you start? What was your life like when you were a kid?
Well, I was born and raised here in El Paso. Grew up in the Lower Valley, ended up graduating from Eastwood High School, and did 1 year at UTEP. And I went to Santa Barbara, California, and earned my bachelor's degree in fine arts and professional photography from the Brooks Institute of Photography. Moved to New York, took a job as a studio manager for a rental studio that belonged to a really talented guy named Ross Whitaker. Ross was caught up in the fashion scene, and I was exposed to the elite photographers, the fashion photographers of the time. Arthur Elgort, Stan Malinowski, Gilles Tapie, Annie Leibovitz, and I started to work as a freelance assistant for a lot of these great photographers, and it was a great journey. Started to shoot my own stuff within a year. Did a contract with Harper's Bazaar in Australia and came back to New York after doing like 180 pages of editorial.
Oh, wow.
Then I met, during that time, I met Eileen Ford, the Ford Model Agency, and her daughter Katie. And they called me up and said, hey, we have a new male model that we need pictures of for his comp card. And it turned out to be Andy Warhol.
What? Really?
At that point, they sent the Chanel girl, the face of Chanel, and the face of Ralph Lauren. Patricia van Rickenheim was Chanel, and Clotilde was Ralph Lauren. And I did these beautiful pictures of them just for the sake of taking beautiful pictures.
Right.
And now I have like some great collectors, and those pictures are, you know, Anna Wintour has a print, Ralph Lauren has a print, the Chanel Corporation, the Warhol Museum, and most recently, a great collector here in El Paso named Jerry Rubin. And he collects a lot of sports memorabilia and art, and his collection is pretty amazing. And he actually acquired the two prints that were on exhibit at the Aspen Art Museum during this major.
And those are the Andy Warhol pieces.
Those are the Andy Warhol pictures, and that whole exhibition there was a retrospective of Andy's life.
Oh.
And I was categorized as a lesser-known artist in Andy's orbit, which was a great thing to be called, because
the connection, right?
Well, the photographers, Helmut Newton, Diane Arbus, Dwayne Michaels. These are like great New York photographers. If you study the history of photography, these guys changed the landscape of photography when they were the hot shooters.
Yeah. But about El Paso, coming back here, so when you were a kid. And this show is about creativity, right? When you were a kid, did you ever think you were going to be a photographer? Was there aspects of what you're doing right now that you incorporate from when you were a child?
We grew up not having like a lot of money and vacations every single summer. And my mom took us to Disneyland. And it was like the one vacation that we had, growing up as kids. And I took all of the pictures.
So you were the photographer, even back then?
And at 7 years of age, I knew what I wanted to do.
Really?
Yeah.
How did that kind of correlate into what you're doing? So when you were in college or in high school, you weren't doing photography, but you were always thinking that, right?
Yeah, I started with concerts. I would sneak my camera into concerts at the El Paso County Coliseum, and I came up with a way, because you weren't allowed to go in with a camera and a long lens. So in those days, they used to take the film out of your camera and check your pockets to make sure you didn't have any more film. Then they'd let you in with a camera. So I figured a way out. What did you do? Exposed film in the camera and a couple of empty rolls in my pocket, and I gave my friends 5 or 6 rolls of film. So then they felt like, okay, we got this guy's film. He can't take
everybody
pictures.
Else in.
And everybody else had already gotten in, and I got in, and I was able to get the film from my friends and take pictures.
No way. And that kind of catapulted you into what you're doing now? So your focus was always to do film then?
Film and video. I mean, those days we didn't have the digital technology that we have today. So it was definitely taking rolls of film. at my 1 year at UTEP, one of the biggest influences in my life is a El Paso photographer named Bruce Berman, who's still here.
Okay.
And Bruce was like my mentor. I don't know if he knows what an impact he had on me, but it was huge.
I think he might know now.
Yeah, and like I learned so much from Bruce. And that first year in photography, I learned what a guy with a camera can actually do and the attention that they sort of get. And it's that 1/60th of a second that stops everything. Where they say a picture is worth 1,000 words. That's like really true.
Explain that to us, because a lot of people, our viewing audience, may not understand what that means. So in the art world, we also use that, right? Because we talk about images, paintings, and even photography, of course, because it is an art form. But what exactly do you think that means? What's your interpretation of that whole concept and idea? Because it's pretty, I think, broad.
It's the idea that you've stopped a moment in time that can be like analyzed and maybe sometimes overanalyzed. Photographers like Dwayne Michaels, Diane Arbus. These were like really famous street photographers in New York, and they would capture like that split second of history that everybody could elaborate on. You could look at the atmosphere, you could look at what the people were doing. It gives you a chance to stop and look at one thing, 60th of a second, and be able to like really like say, hey, yeah, like look at her hair, look at what they're wearing, let's look at the fashion, what about, you know, the lighting on this end of the day, and what about the atmosphere wherever they are. So that photograph is able to, you know, sort of document that 60th of a second in life.
Can you explain to us one of your pieces that has inspired you the most? Maybe a special person or a special individual to you?
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because I heard once that inspiration is for amateurs. When you think about that, as a person who gets commissioned to make something, because I don't really take photographs, I make photographs.
Right.
So I'll look at something and I'll look at, what's this guy wearing? How is his beard combed? What's his hair look like? And, you know, be able to analyze that and say, okay, we need to change the hair, we need to change the shirt. So this is gets into the whole thing of actually making a photograph as opposed to taking a photograph. A lot of my work is assignment work, where you're assigned to create an image that's going to evoke some sort of emotion from the viewer, and it depends on who your audience is and what kind of emotion your client wants to evoke from that image.
Right.
You want them to feel like they want to buy that sweater, or do you want them to feel like, you know, they want to get that kind of a haircut? So it's sort of very superficial in a lot of ways, the commercial part of photography.
Right. When you approach an image, though, how do you approach it when you're talking about all these different aspects? And I ask this question because I teach art appreciation. That's kind of like my main thing. And I really get a kick out of individuals learning why art is important. In other words, a lot of us understand that art exists, right? A lot of us think, oh, a painting is important, but we really don't understand the why behind it, right? And the why is that art is important because it exists all around us, and it incorporates our whole life, our whole existence. It tells us stories. It invokes emotion from us, right? It evokes emotion from us, and I think that's one of the most important things. So when you're applying all these ideas and feelings to your work, how do you approach that specific thing? Is it more about the individual that you're taking, the thing that you're taking, the object, or is it more about the story that you're trying to tell?
I think it's a little bit of both, but it's also a big part of the people that are involved. If
and you're talking about everybody, like who hired you, and also who's in the photograph?
Particularly those that are in the photograph. And we can take, you know, the Andy Warhol shoot, for example. I was getting the models warmed up, and we're just taking beautiful pictures of these, like, you know, beautiful girls. And all of a sudden he walked into the studio, and when he walked into the studio, it was like everybody's attention and everything just sort of stopped, and he commanded the attention. But his energy was so positive that everybody just kind of went, and we're back to doing kind of like what we were doing. And he just blended in with everything else. And when he looked at the wardrobe, and this goes into like, you know, how does it all happen? The stylist had picked Chanel Couture, and she had gone to Ralph Lauren and picked the latest collections, and she'd also gone to the East Village and picked up these crazy outfits that were just like, bizarre.
Vivienne Westwood, I was.
Not even Vivienne Westwood. These were unknown designers in New York City that were in the East Village that were trying to build up. There was a young woman, Sharon Haggerty, who did the millinery, who did the hats. So the stylist picked all of this sort of stuff, and when Andy walked in, he went straight to the weird shit.
Of course.
And he says, can we shoot in this? And I'm like, heck yeah. So there you go. There's the collaboration. So he wanted to do this. I said yes. I don't know what would have happened if I would have said, no, we're shooting Chanel, or no, we're shooting Ralph Lauren. But because he wanted to do it, then everybody was just so in tune with, the hair and makeup made changes without direction. The stylist got him dressed. And he was very timid. I ended up calling the photographs Andy Warhol the model boy. And what happened was he was very stiff and he was very nervous, and you could tell that. I pulled the girls aside and I said, you guys need to flaunt him, grope him, do whatever it is that you have to do, make him comfortable and get him to move, because these were professional models. Right. They knew how to move in front of the camera. They knew their angles that they looked good in. They were like just the cream of the crop. And they got the guy moving, and finally Andy,
loosened up a little.
He loosened up and he stopped being stiff, and I actually felt like in his eyes he was communicating with me. And that's what it's all about.
And you did a lot of this stuff in New York, or did you mostly do it in Miami or in Florida?
No, I did it in New York City.
That's
Coda
very
Lake
cool.
Studio on 20th Street. I want to say it was October 24th.
Very nice.
About this time of year.
I'm impressed by the fact that you remember the actual date, but that was a very important date for you. But then you moved down to Florida and you kind of did a lot of your career there, right?
Well,
or how did that work out?
In New York, I went to Australia and I stayed there for 6 months, and I did a great bit of editorial. Came back to New York, went to London and saw British Vogue, and they started to hire me. So I started to spend 6 months in London and 6 months in New York.
Okay. And
eventually, after 2 or 3 years, I gave up New York and I just went and based myself in London. And that's when I started to hit Europe. Worked a little bit in Paris, quite a bit in Milan, and also in Madrid. And I found representation in each of these, cities and countries. So I would stay in London and, flip around, because it's really easy to travel throughout Europe. And I stayed there for about 9 years. Then I made it to Miami Beach, and I got involved with Ocean Drive magazine, and I was their video producer, because I started to move from stills, and I just loved video, and I just started to make videos. I was untrained, didn't know what I was doing. And I
Isn't that the beauty of learning something new, is the excitement that comes within finding something new, all the little details and whatnot that are associated with that specific thing that you didn't even know that you liked or appreciated. Take us through that journey.
It's interesting that you say that, because that's what people would say. We love your work because it's so raw. It's so untrained. It's so just like, and I never went to school for video. So I think it was because I didn't really know what I was doing, and I just put this stuff together and thought, hey, this to me is like pretty good. I didn't think of if my publisher would like it or if my creative director would like it. I just made stuff because I liked it, and it was raw. It was untrained, and that's what got me going.
Explain to the audience what being or having that frame of mind of being raw is, because I think a lot of people prefer to be a little bit more stiff. They are kind of maybe even programmed to a certain degree to be that way. How does one loosen up?
Boundaries, forget about boundaries and forget about what people think, what you think people think it should be like. So if I sat here and I thought, well, does my publisher think that I should get this one? I just did whatever looked beautiful, and I like to think that in my work, I want to evoke, beauty and emotion. Does it look great? This is the first thing. Irresponsible of what is in the background or the foreground, and does it feel good? So it really just comes from within me, hey, this feels good. I'm going to do this. Not, I think my publisher would prefer if I did this. Whatever I wanted to do, I did.
And what about your journey back to El Paso? Because I know that that's something that we had spoken about before, and it's something that has been very, very important for you and very impactful for you. So you came back for a specific reason. Can you elaborate on that? Because I think that it helps the audience understand who you are as an individual.
Yeah, my mom was 99 and she had a little episode here in El Paso. And I came to check on her and took her to the doctor, and the doctor said it's not dementia or Parkinson's or Alzheimer's. She has delirium. She's malnourished, dehydrated, and fatigued. So I, wanted, for whatever reasons happened, we couldn't find a solution here in El Paso. So I took her to Miami. She lived with me for a year.
Oh, wow.
And she wanted to come back to El Paso. So I rented my house and I brought my mom back for her end of life journey, and it was really special.
Explain in which way?
I held her hand.
How is it impactful for you to have gone and done so many things for such a long time and then come back to experience this, such a deep thing?
Well, I hadn't been back to El Paso to live in over 40 years.
Wow.
And I would come to visit for Christmas, and then we had COVID in 2020 and everybody was locked down. And, she turned 100 in Miami. I had a great party for her, and she knew that her days were limited. We didn't know how long it was going to be. It could be tomorrow, next week, next month, who knows? Right. So I wanted her to die in her bed. And there was nobody else that could do it. So I gave everything up, came here. The last 13 days of her life were the most beautiful in a sort of way. And, I held her hand while she crossed the rainbow. Wow. It was a very deeply touching moment. Beautiful.
Yeah, I can imagine. Having been through that, has that changed you as an individual? Has that forced you to look for different avenues and different highways in your life? And do you think that you're going to be changing anything because of that?
Well, it poses a lot of challenges with the career and the business. First of all, going back to Miami is going to be a challenge. If I do decide to end up going back to Miami, restarting a business that you completely walked away from and, no more clientele. But I was able to stay creative in El Paso. I did a few trips with one of my clients, Norwegian Cruise Lines, where we went to Alaska a couple of times. I did some video edits for them. But being here and not having a business also gave me the chance to do some creative projects that I've always wanted to do. I wrote a screenplay.
Cool.
I finished designing my video game. It's a video basketball game.
Cool.
And I developed a website, pediatriciantips.com, for telemedicine for pediatrics, trying to help those that need help the most, which are children that need, pediatric advice. The screenplay I can't really talk about because I'm actually pitching that to some, Hollywood executives. Right. And I don't even want to reveal the title, but the video game, Playground Legends, it's a mobile AR/VR basketball game that offers a gritty gameplay, confrontational language, and employs the playground tactics of basketball. Nothing to do with any of the professional sports leagues or collegiate sports leagues. Right. And I'm looking for that angel investor who can ignite the innovation and be able to influence a couple of the OG playground legends that I want to develop and take a nice equity chunk of a company. Yeah. So I want to develop a prototype, not the full game, but an actual working prototype to then take it to the great big publishers like the EA Sports and those sorts of things. And I have a pitch deck at playgroundlegends.com that talks about the game and how it works, the mechanics of the game, the monetization, because there's a lot of money in video gaming, esports, and even the concept art. I started to get involved with AI. So I used AI a lot for the concept art in this thing. It's not the real art, but it gives you a solid look and feel to the game. Absolutely. And it offers communities to build up, from the ground up.
Within the game itself?
In the playgrounds, yeah. And like you said, I've been to 36 countries, and I love basketball. And I've played basketball in 36 different courts and playgrounds. And there's the one thing that it doesn't matter if they're Italian or Spanish or, whatever. That game of basketball is something that has an incredible following that people really love. So,
a definite connection to people, for sure. Yeah. So let's get back to creativity, because obviously we're now creative thinkers.
Right.
I notice from what we've been talking about that you just do all kinds of things. That's what I recall from what the great masters during the Renaissance were doing. They weren't just artists, they were creators. How does this allow you to keep moving forward with your next project? In other words, how do you get from a little child going to Disneyland, taking photographs, to becoming a photographer, working around the world, and then coming to a city like El Paso that's just rich with culture, and then moving forward with all these other ideas? What is it about creativity that really drives you to do all of these things?
That's a tough question because I think I just like to make stuff, and I like to make things in different mediums. So it could be a photograph, or it could be a video, but it could be a website, it could be a video game. These are like really specifics,
right? And
I actually would like to, be able to write a screenplay that actually makes it to the silver screen. So I feel challenged. So the answer to that is probably challenges. That's like the creative process. Like, hey, I haven't done that, but maybe I can. And if you don't try, you'll never know whether you can do it or not.
And does the challenge come from within, or does the challenge come from seeing other people do these things?
The challenge comes from my personal life experiences. Like, hey, this is what's happened. This is a good story. That would make a good screenplay.
And those experiences you then bring to fruition in a screenplay in the same way that you could bring it together in a video of some sort.
Yeah.
And these ideas, do they come from a place that is personal to you? In other words, are you always looking for things within you or your environment, or can they come from other places as well? Because this is a huge world that we live in, right? And all kinds of things are happening all the time.
They just show up as your day-to-day goes. If you're walking downtown on El Paso Street, something might happen, or if you're on an airplane and you see something, or if you get to a different city and you notice different customs and things like that. And that's the one thing that's been really super nice about going to 36 different countries. I don't go as a tourist into a super nice hotel and do the tours. I find a place that's reasonably comfortable, where I can base myself out of, and I explore the culture and the people. So when I say travel, I like to think of myself as a traveler and not as a tourist. Like, hey, I'm not here to take the tour to go see the London Bridge, right, or whatever. I will take a walk for a day. And
so you're here to experience, or you're there to experience these things.
Those experiences are there for me to take advantage of. And those situations are there for anybody to go and explore.
Well, that's one of the things that I find interesting, is that when I speak to my students, one of the most important things that I talk about is the fact that an artist, a creator, will take that thing, let's take this cup for example, will take that thing and build it up into something else. And I'm not saying build a bigger cup. I'm saying they will take that cup and wonder, how did this cup come to be? Why did this cup come to be? How did it get into this place? What's the journey that it took? And how can I do something with all of that information? When you take pictures, when you write screenplays, when you do videos, when you create all of this stuff, is there a journey within every single one of those pieces that you take?
There is, and it depends on the medium. And it's a super interesting question because let's just take, you're somewhere and you see something is it a picture? Click. Predatory, or is it a video? Let the camera roll and let's watch. Voyeurism. So I think that's a big thing for me. It's would I rather capture this still? And it's the instant decision, something that just comes naturally.
Right.
And I think with what's happened with cameras nowadays, where you can just flip the switch and hey, you're a voyeur, or flip the switch or hey, you're a predator. Sometimes I'll do both, but sometimes it's just nicer to watch things play out.
Right.
Somebody walking down the street or sipping on that cup of coffee from that cup of cup,
right,
as opposed to capturing it in a still image. It's more interesting visually. And one of the things I've really gotten into is adding animation to my still photos. Taking that still photo, animating the water so it looks like it's moving, and the clouds so it looks like it's and being able to take something still like that and adding motion to it.
And this is all through AI, I assume?
Well, no, this is a different program that you would use on the computer to actually do that. But AI, a lot of artists right now are thinking, I'm going to get replaced by AI. But they're not. They're going to get...
That's like painters thinking they were going to be replaced by photographers. And as Pablo Picasso said, one of the most important things that has happened in my life is the fact that a camera exists, because it has liberated me to do as I please. I no longer have to recreate what I see. I can imagine these things and create these new environments. Having said that, how important is creativity within your work? Because creativity can be an aspect of it, but is it really important? That's kind of the premise of the show, is to allow people to have a better understanding of why creativity should be incorporated into their lives as much as it can.
Super well stated. I don't think I've heard anybody describe that better than today. And just for a second, with the creativity in AI, it's a very creative thing. So artists and people, graphic design, people like that will never be replaced by AI, but they might be replaced by somebody who uses AI if they don't. You know what I'm saying?
True, yeah.
And that's like when Picasso says the camera is the best thing in his life, because maybe now he can take a still picture of that flower and use it as a reference and be able to be creative based on that still picture. So the text prompts that you provide AI come from within, and you start to understand how AI listens to you and then reacts. So it's sort of like very creative how you communicate with AI to get what you want from AI, not just what AI is going to do for you.
Yeah, it's not just, it's a tool, right? Like a paintbrush.
Yeah.
We used to paint with our hands, right? Back in the day when we didn't have paintbrushes, then we used this tool. It's not like our hand was going to fall off because we now have paintbrushes, which is very, very true. So in this show, because the conversations are so great, time runs out very quickly. What is the project that you have in the future? Just very quickly.
Well, I think my next chapter in life is going to be called My Turn, and I'm going to be unapologetic AF about it. You know, this is my turn.
And do whatever you can within that turn that you have.
I'm going to garner all the things that I've put together in my repertoire and chase them all. I want the screenplay. I want the video game. I want this website to happen. I'm going to get back into shooting pictures and making videos. Yesterday, I spent a little bit of time with a guy named Gaspar Enriquez. And I went to his place in San Elizario. I thought, what a wonderfully talented guy this guy was. And I just love being in that environment and being with people like that.
Yeah, connections are very, very important. One last thing that I always ask all of my guests is, do you have any advice that you can give our viewers? Because you may have some knowledge that hasn't been let out into the public. What can you tell them? And it can be based on anything.
I would think that be very careful who you take advice from. Your mom and dad and cousins are always going to tell you you're great. Look for different sources that are more realistic to where you want to go. And then listen to your heart.
Listen to your heart is important.
Yeah. Do you feel this is the right thing to do? But the most important thing is, like, not the most important thing, but a very important thing is who you take the advice from.
And just be leery of that, or at least calculate it.
My mom's always going to love what I do.
Yeah.
My dad's always going to love what I do. But as somebody who's working in the field that I want to get into, and they be like, should I listen to them when they tell me, you know, this
or that, right?
Exactly.
This or that. So how do people get a hold of you if they want to hire you to take photographs of them?
David Siqueiros, photographer, on a Google search is really easy. I have a website. It's my last name, siqueiros.com.
Okay.
I'm all over Facebook. I have an Instagram. I'm really easy to find. I get confused a lot with my great-great-uncle, who's David Alfaro Siqueiros, who's one of the 3 great Mexican muralists. So, but I'm
hence the name.
Yeah, I'm not him, but he was like an intense guy, and definitely family, and he's definitely somebody I really admire, but a totally different kind of an artist. So yeah, you just have to make sure you get the right David Siqueiros.
I think people will be able to find you well. David, I want to thank you for taking your time out to talk to us. Your story is fantastic, and I hope that you enjoyed yourself.
Thank you. I had a great time. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Our pleasure. And for everybody out there watching us, I want to thank you guys for joining us once again. Also, if you guys need to get in contact with me, you guys can email me at mvalen31@epcc.edu, and we will see you guys next time and have more guests for you. Thank you very much.